All right. So first thing you may notice is that the picture quality on this video is not the best. Things are going to look a little foggy, a little blurry, and it's not a focus issue. It's not a resolution issue. I can't wait to see what this looks like when I drop it down to 144. But this phone that I've had for like 3 weeks now has got a screen cracked worse than the one I just replaced. Except this screen's working, the other one's screen wasn't. That phone was almost 5 years old. So that's the first thing you're going to notice. My bad. So there's a lot of wild stuff going on. And I kind of had an urge to make a video. I think this one's going to be a little bit of an omnibus, have a whole bunch of stuff in it. Don't mistake the fact that the topics may be all over the place with me being all over the place. I'm just right here. I'm just watching all this crazy shit happen around me and taking notes internally. So, don't know what's going on with Armageddon. Seeing little things here and there, distancing myself from the whole dumpster fire. In that case, ultimately Israel's going to get what it wanted. Just like ultimately Russia got what they wanted. Supposedly a new sickness going around in the country where the last pandemic sickness came from. This time supposedly only affecting kids. Same time of the year that it came around in 2019 with the other virus. Just in time. Just in time for campaign year. Isn't that magical? I may have already caught it, whatever it was going around. Week and a half, 2 weeks, something like ago. I caught what began as what felt like a sinus infection, moved to a sore throat, which then became a bronchial infection, which then attempted to become pneumonia. At this point, I've got like a little bit of expectoration here and there, hacking stuff up from the bottom of my lungs, but none of the illness features are there anymore. And of course, in and amongst all the things going on in the world, don't forget, the news is constantly lying to you about pretty much everything. They might tell you the correct time of day. They might tell you the correct temperature outside. They might say their name correctly. But in all other respects, they are just lying to you. Nowadays, it's become fashionable for these people to actually start to turn the herd, the mindless people that just believe whatever they're told, that it's okay to start ragging on Biden. You may have noticed. Bit by bit, little by little, any and all of a leg to stand on that may have been perceptible at a distance, if you squint, about the cases against the former president are eroding, vanishing, becoming obvious that they were never there to begin with. If you talk to the average person, just people abroad that are not specifically folks you've chosen to be in your bubble of your circle of like-minded friends, you will find that most people on some level have a sense of most of what's really going on. They may not be able to fully articulate it. They may not even completely realize that they have this sense of it. And at the same time, if you mention it in the right way, they go, yeah, you're right. That is true. There was that whole Speaker of the House thing that happened. That was kind of fun to watch. I was actually kind of a little concerned for a second because it was like, man, what if in the name of standing up and doing the right thing and sticking to your guns, Matt Gaetz accidentally let the most establishment crony sack of shit into the speakership, even more so than McCarthy. McCarthy had his moments a little bit. You could tell he was doing what he was doing, but when he gave them a bone, which the establishment likes to do, right? They just throw you a little breadcrumb here, toss you a bone there, a little something here, that it was better. It was better. And when the new speaker took over and said, yeah, I don't think that we actually have the necessary evidence, actual proof to impeach the president for all the things we know he's doing. That most people, if you were to mention it to them in the right way, would be like, yeah, that is true. That they are doing that, aren't they? He is doing that. Or at least it looks like it. And that might also be some kind of, 9D chess or whatever. Who knows? Who knows? Watching the Dr. John Campbell channel. He is one of the leading, if not the leading, nursing instructor in the UK. And he has been reporting on things that have been increasingly allowed to be studied and reported on accurately. And it's not a good looking thing. A lot of damage has been done. Most of the people the damage has been done to may not quite yet understand, nor would most of the rest of us, I think, fully understand, because all of it hasn't completely manifested yet. But they won't necessarily understand, or maybe they're starting to, because of what I'm about to talk about. To understand the negative consequences of the choices some of us have made. Now, I refused. I did my research first because I became concerned at the way that things were being presented. I said, I better find out before it's impossible to do so. Because, man, it's 2023. I've been red pill awake, seeing the Matrix code, as it were. Not literally, right? Not literally. But seeing it for what it is in various phases and forms, and making my way out of the complete somnambulist coma of being a person just doing their life in the world and thinking everything's normal and it's just the way it is. Since 2003. It's been 20 years. 20 years serving on the Nebuchadnezzar, as it were. And I've been trying to warn people, and people never listen. And some of the things it's not like anybody can really do anything about, like 9/11, the wars that happened after that. How do you stop that from the ground, from the Midwest, from the middle of nowhere? How do you stop that? But when it comes to your town, and it says you need to do the thing we tell you to do, shut the fuck up and do it. And you go, well, what is it you're trying to get me to do? And they say it. And you say, okay, and why? And they say, because we said so, and here's a few excuses, reasons why. And you're like, man, that don't make sense. I'm going to go find out. And you go find out, and it turns out it's not that hard to find out. And then you're like, oh, wow, they're totally lying, just like all these other people in the media and the news. This medical industry's lying too. Great, government's totally lying. We knew that. Well, some of us did. Now maybe all of us do. A lot of us. Yeah, I guess that is true. Yeah, they do lie. So at Dr. John Campbell, foremost nursing instructor in Great Britain and the United Kingdom from the title. Seems solid, by the way. I'm not knocking on him. I'm not roasting him. I'm saying he is someone who has demonstrated, in my opinion, some expertise to the point where I can pretty well trust. I can still question. I can still look. He provides sources. The papers he's doing studies on, he's got them right up when he's talking about them. So at first they started doing studies on adverse events and long-term health consequences. Part of it was because it was becoming undeniable in a country where it had been mandated by the government, by the crown. And everyone got it. They've got these large test demographics to study and find out what happens when you do the thing that people like me were like, that's a terrible idea. When you do that, when you do it anyway, for everybody. Do studies on it. What they're coming up with is a lot of scary negative things. Things that were fairly easily predictable and or early anecdotal cases that were labeled and set aside as conspiracy theory are turning out to be the norm, the regularity. And a lot of people have it. I think a lot of people are scared to admit it, or a lot of other people have got doctors that are willing to what am I wanting to say? Doctors that are willing to diagnose otherwise so that it doesn't look like that, because they don't want to, people to lose their faith in the whatever. Speaking of which, elections, that's a whole other topic. You could just take medical industry and put election integrity, switch places, and this conversation, this whole dialogue, whatever, monologue would be exactly the same. You don't want people to lose their faith in the system, huh? As the system fails them miserably, harms them. It's definitely a thing. It's definitely there. The last several days, Dr. Campbell has been going over what they're now starting to refer to as post-vaccine syndrome. And a syndrome, according to him, which is, he's using medical terminology definitions, but he explains that a syndrome is a collection of symptoms, not an actual disease. And of all the things that this syndrome entails, the primary and biggest symptom is exercise fatigue, or what do they say? I can't remember what the term he used was. So basically, you can't exercise because you become immediately exhausted, or your heart just goes nuts. So it would be like you do 3 sit-ups and your heart's doing what my heart does after I've carried 8 carts of firewood up the hill. So you can't exercise. You can't really work out. You can't really keep fit or active. And as such, you become sedentary. And as you become sedentary, your health fails. You become depressed, anxious, guilt-ridden. A lot of this, in my opinion, from my own experiences with my own subconscious, is that when you realize that you've made a terrible mistake, even if you try and lie to yourself and keep going, doesn't matter, I feel fine, this is fine, your subconscious is still going to send you guilt chemicals into the brain. So one of the things that this syndrome, and a lot of other people, just like in this study of all British people, basically, that most people over there are depressed. Horribly, clinically, and almost cripplingly in a lot of cases, depressed, racked with anxiety and feelings of guilt, worthlessness. These are their subconsciouses, their subconscious minds fighting back against a terrible choice that was already made, that nothing can now be done about, that cannot be undone. And as I said, I refused. These people are now looking at long-term suffering, prolonged suffering for the rest of their lives, however long or short, however it is. You know, Canada's got their MAID thing, medically assisted intentional death or whatever it is. Maybe Britain's going to come out with that too. It's going to be like fucking Children of Men. Nobody's able to reproduce anymore. People are starting to buy these kits at the store that lets you take a peaceful exit. It's horrifying. I mean, that's what people want to do, let them do it. But the fact that they're basically been tricked, coerced into a terrible, terrible choice, it's terrible. And then the long-term consequences, or here's your quietest box. That's a bad deal. I am of the belief personally that informed consent is a natural human right, especially in a society. That goes for elections, that goes for medical advice, that goes for financial advice. That's the whole reason why scams are illegal, why fraud is illegal. Informed consent. The right to know, the right to make your own choice based on what you're able to know, and not just what they let you know. I empathize with what these people get to deal with. I have little to no sympathy, and my ability to be compassionate in the matter is stunted because of my own post-traumatic stress to do with the way that I acutely suffered for being right. Now they will all suffer prolongedly. The opposite of acute, what is that, obtusely? They're going to suffer obtusely. They were obtuse while I was suffering acutely. And now they will experience prolonged, permanent consequence suffering. Mental anguish, all kinds of things. Maybe they'll get a settlement out of Pfizer, but I doubt it. Seems to me they passed one of those terrible corporate oligarchy protection act where that company and all of its products are now immune from civil recourse. And now, just before a vital time when it would be really nice and people are, you know, we got courts in like 6 states now ruling that their process of selecting their Republican government, the so-called democracy part, is horribly broken, cannot be trusted. Oh my God, like I said, we wouldn't want people to lose faith. There's a new disease going around that's going to make its way here possibly. If they do some crap like that, it's just the right time here. So that by the time that it's supposed to be campaigned for primaries and get out and vote on several occasions, once in the summer, once in the late fall, we'll all be done with mail-in, prone to fraud ballots in a system that we already, I think, should know by now is full of that. And what spurred me to make this video is this: to get to this point, if you have an election and the election is, factually speaking, not speculating about a real one. This is all hypothetical, YouTube. Don't take it like I'm talking about a particular election. I'm talking about philosophically, hypothetically. If you had one in a place where it actually was broken and or, fixed, rigged, and everybody knew it, and everybody said so, you would have the government and the media, a tiny minority of people compared to all of the rest of them. Tiny, tiny minority. Telling the rest of them to sit down and shut up. There is no evidence, and even if you bring evidence, there's no way that anything we're going to find here, they will say this in advance to avoid having to actually check. They will say, this isn't going to result in an outcome-altering result. To me, I say it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You must check it. You must be sure. The issue is, like, you have all these people come out and protest. Well, here's the deal. Government, people in government, not that any of them are watching this. Here's the deal, though. You kind of need to count how many people are out there protesting in some of the local things. Determine which ones are local and which ones are transplants from out of town that are here to rouse the rabble. And if you cut through the antagonists and transplants and provocateurs, and you find that far more than a majority of the entirety of the people who actually voted in the election in question are saying, hey, we disagree with this outcome. If your authority is based on the law is based on the Constitution, and the Constitution is based on the protection of the rights of those people, you literally have no choice but to investigate fully. Make a record. They kind of did that in Maricopa. The foot dragging from the county election board people made it impossible for the legislature to do anything about an obvious problem that was demonstrably there. And now there's more court cases in that state as well as others on the same basic type of thing. And these are all the things that people were saying. And you know what's funny? If you were actually deep into it, looking and searching and trying to figure things out and paying attention, you would know that all of the lawsuits that are getting attention now, that are actually getting headway, were filed in like 2018 or before. There was one that was from 2014. So you've got things that were going on back then that those of us that were following these other things were aware. And we're also telling people who then were like, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. There's a pattern to this. There's a pattern to this, right? It's aggravating. The newer cases, we're using those older cases as reference material. What to or not to do, what was still going in, if there's a possibility of other things. They were not unknown until now. They were known. Much like the studies to do with things like masks and how coronaviruses work, especially beta coronaviruses, and whether or not any kind of vaccination would actually be effective. And because of the specific instructions on the packaging for the hurriedly rushed out shot, they already knew about the intramuscular versus intravenous issue, and that if it was intravenous, it would result in a lifetime of chronic heart issues. But that doing it correctly with the intramuscular would result in a really painful monkey bump, and the people would be dissuaded. And we don't want people to lose trust in this system. Oh, Jesus, there it is again. Are we paying attention? Are we noticing the pattern? Am I just talking to myself? And now the people that en masse just shut the fuck up and did what they were told, despite, in a lot of cases, people warning them, trying to get everybody to resist together. All of those people are now being diagnosed with enormous depression, racked with guilt, just general bad vibes and mood. that they just can't break out of. And part of this might be because they are stuck in a sedentary lifestyle because of the heart problems that prevent them from ever being active, while sitting there stewing in that misery, having their subconscious continually remind them, like when you're trying to go to sleep and that shit you said in 3rd grade comes back to you and makes you so guilt-racked about being a moron when you were a kid or whatever. See what I'm getting at? Their subconsciouses are keeping them awake, talking shit about their bad decision. And then when they're like acknowledging the depression, their subconsciouses are like, hey man, but whose fault was it? Who did this to us? I suffered acutely. It was just, I knew it would pass. Either sanity would prevail or all those people would die. A little bit of both is what I'm getting. I'm having a hard time feeling sorry for the people in that position of having just went with it. I'm having difficulty sympathizing at all because a lot of them definitely were warned. I'm wondering how much of it around here is going to be a thing in America where that's at. Are people more depressed, more anxious, more guilt-stricken, and racked with remorse? Sorry. Is that happening here too? I mean, our government's so incompetent / deceptive that they would never tell us if it was. So look around. Is that what's going on? The bottom line is, in any capacity, if you take the mark of the beast, you go to hell. Depending on your beliefs, your interpretations, where it is that your angle is coming from, and sometimes it doesn't matter what you believe, it matters what's true. That there are some people, depending on how they're born and what their circumstances are, that may take the mark and then may go to hell and then may work their way out. If there is a single interpretation as to what that constitutes, then it really is a totalitarian society saying, if you don't do this thing, then we will not allow you to participate economically and you'll suffer acutely. There were people who are surely having some kind of subconscious remorse trip, insomnia, depression, and exercise averted fatigue or whatever it is, that wanted me to be homeless and or starve to death. That's why I got no sympathy. I think what it is that it is clearly the apocalypse. And people who are attuned to what that is, even if they don't fully understand it, the book itself is pretty damn true in a lot of ways. There's a lot of stuff. And it's symbolic, which is the language of the subconscious, which means that if you have any exposure to its symbolism whatsoever, your subconscious can potentially create a fractalized, interpretive simulation or simulacrum of it. So one way or another, your subconscious mind, if you've done something forever altering your life for the negative, especially if it's a thing you chose. I mean, people get completely traumatized from things that are inflicted upon them. But what about things that are inflicted upon themselves? A lifetime of guilt and misery and a subconscious that will not let up to remind them whose fault it really is. That is a thing that is happening right now. I do not regret my choice one bit. My soul is intact. My spirit is purer now than it ever has been. My conscience is clear. And my health is reasonable for my age. I certainly need to watch some things. I need to take better care of myself, even though I already kind of do take better care of myself than my dad did at his age, at the same age. I think there was one other thing. Oh, yeah. Two things. In between all of the things I've been watching, I've also been doing a whole bunch of automotive repair and keeping my car running as well as possible. I've now replaced 3 out of 4 calipers. I've got new pads on all 4 corners. I've got a few other minor things, some sway bar links and other stuff to work on in the coming week. And then after that, I'm going to be putting new struts on it. And at that point, should be good to go, assuming that the bumper cruncher of a driveway lip that I took the underside of my chin of my bumper didn't do some further damage. Some things have been vibrating funny since that happened. Although I think it might just be brittle pieces of plastic from the defroster vent, because that thing, every time I've taken a huge bump, a piece is broken off. It's wild. The last thing I was going to get to is something that I've seen some other mention of on a few other YouTube channels already. So I'm not going to act like I'm the one coming up with the idea. I'm just going to throw my 2 cents in on this one too. Gang stalking is a real thing. There are multiple kinds. Some of them are just crazy evil people with a whisper inside their brain that coordinates all these people to do a thing. And it's some kind of torment or whatever. That's a real thing. That is what most people refer to as demonic gang stalking. I don't know if it's actually a demon, but something about the subconscious or a collective of some sort or whatever, that you have these weird little hive minds of psychos that do things. Oftentimes, it's a cluster bee hive. There are also ones who do so at the behest of government, usually somewhat local, although they also do it on a federal level. You see, there is a supply and demand situation where, in order to justify the budgets of government entities and law enforcement, they need a supply. They have a demand for a supply, I should say, of critical law enforcement successes, busts, operations carried out successfully, etc., that result in a demonstrable accumulation of people being held accountable to their violations of the law or whatever, that then justify the budgets for the next year. And if there are not enough people, sometimes for politicized reasons, governments will, whether local, state, federal, however it goes, take action to try and foster operations for the specific purpose of entrapping people. But oftentimes you come to find out that the overwhelming majority of people in a supposed threatening terror organization or militia group turned out to all be FBI confidential informants or undercover agents. And if these people were approaching other folks to try and get them to have conversations about this stuff so they could try and wrangle them in and say, oh, look, see that? These guys that got arrested trying to kidnap the governor of the state. And it turns out like 2 guys were there at the meetings that weren't feds. And everybody else was from various interagency sting operation. And it's like that. This entire reality show is for this one guy. But the government version. And those are technically a kind of gang stalker too. And there are also ones who are simply there to attempt to get a person that is some kind of a trigger to the sensibilities of the herd. Someone who is too outspoken or too sane, who thinks too critically, who is too right too often. People who see through the bullshit are a threat to the control they have over everyone else. And these people who are a gang stalker of this variety what they do is they attempt to make a person act out in a way that could cause them to be charged, arrested, incarcerated, or made a further pariah. And these are a real thing. There are people who are obligated not to acknowledge that this is what they do for the sake of the operation. It's like a classified kind of thing, who then get caught doing what they're doing and get charged and themselves look at prison time for what basically constitutes organized harassment. Well, the difference is when it's the government organizing the harassment, they like to claim that it's legit. The truth is it's not. Anybody who's compelled to behave that way is usually something to do with them having dirt on that person too. A charge that they say, you know what, if you work with us, you won't get charged. There's all kinds of different ways and reasons why a person gets into a situation like that. But there's someone that I've encountered recently that I initially thought might be there for someone else. But it is entirely also possible that they are just there, as it were, to try and get me to act a fool. Now, if you're watching this right now and you're thinking to yourself, well, bro, you are a fool. Does your subconscious keep you up at night? Even if you lie to yourself and tell yourself? Does it keep you up at night? Does it remind you of all of your weaknesses, all of your failings and mistakes? Does it let you know that your current state of living is one big failure as well? One big mistake? One big weakness? If you think I'm a fool. Joel says they're after you, but you see it right away. Even New Breed's saying that they're out there. And there are others. The only way to fight evil is by being good. It's the only way. You cannot do evil things in the name of good. The only way to fight evil is to be good. And what happens is, the light that you shine from being good burns them so badly, like a vampire with sunlight, that they either must flee or they perish right there. Watch someone just lose their shit when they were trying to get you to do the same. And all you have to do is not react, not get upset, not be, violent in any way. Because what they're trying to get you to do is act on what they know you are capable of. But the thing is, I would expect that it's some kind of a heretical blasphemy to attempt to get a person to engage in, say, a function that they would have, say, in another life. Other layers of reality, far, far above the mundane world of humans. Certain people are just connected to things. Certain people have other functions. And it would be like some bag of worms and dirt, a walking fucker, trying to get someone else to act out in a way that would effectively be an archangel swinging the burning sword in anger. The goal being to make a person act out, be forced themselves to move, to change something, or to perish. But that person is not what's important, and the actions they take are not what's important. It is the forcing of this anchor or connection to that higher, brighter light that they can't stand, to try and get that gone. if the person who represents that, who is connected to that, just stays centered, does their thing, the ones who are there for malintent very quickly become agitated, very quickly show true colors, drop the mask, have a melty, and ultimately either have to try and stick around and deal with the fact that they've been completely made, completely exposed by themselves, or take their leave. If they were real people, it wouldn't go like that, it wouldn't come to that, and it wouldn't end like that. And when I say real people, I'm not talking about, will they be demons? I'm talking about phonies. I'm talking about people who pretend to be one thing for an ulterior motive. And it's not ego, it's not pride, it's not even monetary profit. It's something else entirely. Something that makes them evil. That's all I got. Hope everybody has a good Thanksgiving. I intend to. And savor the moment. Enjoy these times that we have now, because things can always get worse. Be thankful for everything in your life that you might be miserable without. Be thankful for everyone in your life who cares about you, because that all could get wiped out at any time.